So there is a famous phrase in this community of people who are learning Japanese, and that is Nihongo Jouzu. It means your Japanese is good. And if you go to Japan and speak Japanese, at some point you will hear it. This is a compliment, but many people hate it. Why is that? Well, some people feel it's insincere because they might say it even though your Japanese isn't that good. For example, you can be saying, ありがとうございます Thank you. And they will be like, 日本語上手ですね Wow, your Japanese is good. When that's literally the only Japanese you know. Because of that, some people feel it's patronizing because they feel like Japanese people are treating them like kids. It can also be repetitive. If you hear 日本語上手ですね every time you say something in Japanese, it can get old pretty quickly. And when you live in Japan for a while and speak pretty good Japanese, you can feel like it has an othering effect. Because most of the time they only say it with non-native speakers, although there are some exceptions. Nihongo Jouzu reminds you that you're not Japanese. So if you want to be treated like Japanese people, this is not a phrase that you want to hear. And some people seem to really hate Nihongo Jouzu. They seem to be quite resentful. And other people say that you're overreacting. They say that it's just a compliment, so why be upset? As for me, this is something I can completely relate to. I like learning languages, and I've had similar experiences with different languages like English, Spanish, or French. I've gotten 英語上手, スペイン語上手, and フランス語上手. In fact, I even get 英語上手 on my YouTube channel. It's not like I'm super offended or anything, but it does sometimes feel like this level of attention to my language abilities is uncalled for. Although sometimes it's pretty amusing. I have gotten Nihongo Jouzu by a Japanese person. He said, I'm surprised that there's a foreign YouTuber who teaches Japanese. And on top of that, his pronunciation is perfect. And I've also experienced the opposite case where they say my English is not good. This was when I went to New York for the first time. I wanted to buy a ticket and the guy explained something to me which I couldn't fully understand. And he said, Oh, I see that you don't speak English very well. Happy times. I can't decide which is worse, getting 英語上手 or getting 英語下手. But the thing is, people complimenting your second language happens everywhere, not just in Japan. So the question is, does it happen significantly more in Japan? I think it's possible that it does, but this kind of thing is hard to quantify. I've made many videos with my non-Asian friends who speak Japanese. They approached random Japanese people and spoke Japanese to them. I went through the footage quickly, but I couldn't find an instance where Japanese people said 日本語上手ですね to them. So I think getting 日本語上手 depends on the situation. And perhaps generations, because I feel like older generations might do it more than younger generations. But that's just my guess. I think many of you guys have gotten Nihongo Jouzu at some point, and you definitely get it if you play Animal Crossing. But knowing Japanese culture, I wouldn't be surprised if you got this more often in Japan. And I can think of a few reasons. For example, some Japanese people have this idea that people are not interested in Japan, let alone learning Japanese. Let me show you this clip from my fellow YouTuber, Sora the Troll.
13年前、自分は日本が嫌いだった。日本は世界から嫌われており、誰も日本に興味がないと思っていた。
A lot of Japanese people share this kind of sentiment. Of course, you guys know that Japan is a rather popular country, and Japanese is one of the most popular languages to learn. But if you grew up in Japan only speaking Japanese, you don't necessarily know that. Even if you do, you might not feel like it's real. There's definitely popular discourse in Japan that Western countries are more advanced and Japan is behind, which might be true in some cases, but definitely not true in all cases. So Japanese people feel like, oh, why would people be interested in Japan when we don't really have much to offer? So when they meet somebody who is interested in Japan and speaks some Japanese, they will be genuinely surprised. Thus, 日本語上手ですね Another aspect is that many Japanese people really struggle to learn English, which is a very difficult language for us, especially when it comes to pronunciation. As I demonstrated in some of my videos, they really have trouble understanding simple words or pronouncing them. Once, my mom ordered coffee on the plane, and they gave her Coke. Coffee in Japanese is kohi, so it sounds very different. And because of this, saying a simple word and being understood is already pretty difficult for Japanese people. So when you say something in Japanese and it's understandable, Japanese people can be very surprised. Oh, you say something in Japanese and I can totally understand it. Thus, 日本語上手ですね. In this case, 上手 doesn't mean you're fluent in Japanese. It means you can say something understandable in a foreign language, which is pretty difficult for many Japanese people. I would argue that it's easier for English speakers to say something understandable in Japanese than for Japanese speakers to say something understandable in English. In fact, being conversational in Japanese isn't really that hard, especially if you learn Japanese with me, because I will teach you the kind of Japanese the real-life Japanese people today actually speak, because textbooks and apps don't really teach you many important words and expressions that we use all the time in real-life Japanese. So click the link in the description and subscribe to my email group. Having said that, I can totally understand why some people get upset when they get Nihongo Jouzu. Even though Japanese people don't have bad intentions, not having bad intentions doesn't automatically make things good. But because some Japanese people live in a very different reality where they have no idea how popular Japan is, some people may misinterpret the intention. I've even come across people who think Nihongo Jouzu is sarcasm. It is not. People can be pretty ignorant. Once I met this English girl in France who was surprised that I spoke English. So I told her that we learn English in school in Japan, and in fact, most people around the world learn English in school. And she was genuinely surprised. It's like she was thinking that English is a super local language that people in her village speak. If an English speaker can be like that, it's really not that surprising that some Japanese people think that Japanese is a super local language that nobody is interested in. Some people just read too much into this. They might think, oh, Japanese people are trying to encourage you. Or Japanese people are polite and they try to elevate you while putting themselves down. Or Japanese people are trying to say thank you for making an effort to learn Japanese. But to me, Nihongo Jouzu sounds more like a simple exclamation that, oh, you said something in Japanese. So again, Jouzu doesn't always mean that you are actually fluent. It can also mean that they have very low expectations from foreigners or non-Asian people when it comes to speaking Japanese, which can actually be a problem because sometimes I feel like Japanese people treat other people like non-Asians as though they are in a very different category of human being. And this bothers me a lot. You can't always use ignorance as a good excuse. There's definitely a kind of prejudice in some cases. Some people think that if you're not an Asian, you're not capable of fully speaking Japanese. And that's not good. But this could kind of go both ways because I've noticed that there's a very popular video genre where non-Asian people go around shocking Japanese people by speaking Japanese. And if you watch those videos, most of the time, Japanese people aren't really that shocked, unless you make them think that you don't speak Japanese by only speaking English initially. So I think there's also a kind of prejudice that Japanese people can't possibly understand that non-Asian people are completely capable of speaking Japanese. But I digress. But Japanese people are not all that innocent all the time either. This person is half Japanese and a native speaker of Japanese, and was told, 日本人より日本語うまいね. Your Japanese is better than Japanese people, by somebody they have been friends with for years. And of course, if you say, you speak Japanese better than Japanese people, it implies that you are not really Japanese. And sometimes you see the same person regularly, and they always Nihongo Jouzu you when they already know that you speak Japanese. Some people have a rather limited brain resources, don't they? And overall, I actually relate to people who are bothered by getting Nihongo Jouzu much more than Japanese people who Nihongo Jouzu you. And I want to share what I think is the perfect reply to Nihongo Jouzu. This person shared, "Azasu," which means thank you, in a very colloquial way. I think this is a very good reply because it's humorous and not ill-intentioned. At the same time, it communicates with them that you're not playing the Nihongo Jouzu game. And you can say it very quickly. This is not the kind of phrase that they expect to hear. So you're not playing a stereotypical foreigner and you sound like you know what you're talking about. So the next time somebody says, "Nihongo jouzu desu ne," just say, "Azasu," and tell me how they react. But if you do, they will think you speak really good Japanese. So if you don't, I will teach you the kind of Japanese that real-life Japanese people today actually speak, because textbooks and apps don't teach you how we actually speak Japanese every day. So click the link and subscribe to my email group, Japanese with Yuta.